On this episode of CGQ&A, I answer viewer questions while waxing nostalgic about the good old days of video game collecting, and some friends and I talk about the possibility of traveling back in time. All right, welcome to CGQ&A Episode 1. Just a quick explanation of what this series may or may not turn into. Some of you may have watched the 10,000 subscriber thank you episode I did a while back, where I talked about how I wanted to do some candid, unscripted content, and that's what I want this series to be. So I have no idea how often I would upload something like this, but basically if you see something that says CGQ&A, then you know that's like unscripted content and it's not like a launch episode or whatever. But it might be me answering your questions or me asking you questions and then reading the answers on the air. I might want to interview some third party, or maybe I want to do like a how-to video. I mean, who knows? I don't know what's going to become of this, but if you like the show, then check it out. And if you don't like it, then no big deal. Like I said, just don't watch it. So first things first, today is Saturday, September 3rd, and this weekend is the Italian Grand Prix. So I am back wearing what one viewer called a Wendy's uniform shirt, and obviously Forza Ferrari, and we'll see how good or how well they can do this weekend. I just wanted to say real quick before we get started that sort of the next real episode of the show or whatever that I'm going to be doing that I'm already working on is the launch of the Nintendo 64, which a lot of people have been requesting. And this is, as I said, this is September of 2016, and this month is actually the 20-year anniversary of the launch of the Nintendo 64. It was scheduled to be launched on the 29th, and then was actually launched on the 26th instead, for reasons that we'll get into in the launch episode. That launch episode is coming, and I don't make any promises, but it is my intention to have that episode done before the actual anniversary date of the Nintendo 64 launch, for what I hope are obvious reasons. I just wanted to say a quick thanks to everybody for just the massive support that I got for the Super Nintendo launch video. I knew that it was going to be a big video, but I had no idea that it was going to blow up the way it did. I think it only took it 10 days for that video to become my most watched video ever. And I just can't thank you guys enough. It's been really awesome, and I have a really cool group of fans. So as I said, today I'm going to be answering viewer questions with the help of my assistant Rob, who is holding the cards. And so let's just get right to it. Thank you, Rob. All right, so this is a question I've actually gotten quite a few times, and I don't really know why. I got like a flurry of this a while back, and then people quit asking. But the question is, why is your show called Classic Gaming Quarterly? So basically what happened is I've sort of had the idea for this whole creative enterprise for about 10 years, going back to 2006. And the idea was to have a fanzine. And originally, I even made a mock-up cover. And that's as far as I ever got with the fanzine. But I made a mock-up cover, and the whole point was that it was going to be a 16-bit centric fanzine. And then later I kind of figured, well, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. And so I came up with this idea to call it Classic Gaming Quarterly, like after Gentleman's Quarterly. And obviously I never made the fanzine. But I made a website, and then just over time, this channel has gotten way more popular than the website ever was. I still update the website every once in a while, but really it's like that's now the website for this YouTube channel versus this being the YouTube channel for that website. So it doesn't really make sense that it's called Classic Gaming Quarterly, although I do joke that I only upload one episode a quarter. I wish that was a little bit less true than it actually is. But anyway, so that's where the name came from. So next question. This is a good question. What games in your collection are expensive now, but were bought cheap earlier on? And this was asked by a guy named Simon Papa on Twitter, which, by the way, is an excellent way to submit questions for future episodes. You can just hit me up on Twitter. I'm at CG Quarterly. And if you follow me on there, I promise I really don't tweet very often, so I'm not going to like tweet spam you or anything. So he wants to know what games I have that are expensive now that I bought cheap, basically. And honestly, Simon, the easy answer is all of them. I have been buying games, like, buying old games since the mid to late 90s. I started in 1996 or 1997 just buying old Nintendo games because, at that point Nintendo games were completely worthless, but I grew up with a Nintendo and I really didn't have that many games, and so I just wanted to get all the games that I had wanted to have when I was a kid and couldn't. And I never considered myself a collector. It was just that I just wanted to play the games that I had wanted when I was a kid. And so I started with that NES, and it was like 40 games or something. It was a lot. And then I ended up, I had given away my Genesis not too long before because I'd gotten a PlayStation. And I ended up rebuying a Genesis and buying some games on eBay and stuff, like the early days of eBay. And I actually, I don't want to turn this into a habit where I'm going to show off like game pickups because I don't really do that. But I actually just got this in the mail yesterday. And so it was in 2003 or 2004 when I joined a website called Digital Press, which kind of it's a pretty irrelevant website now. But at the time, it at least felt like it was sort of the premier place to hang out for people who were into old video games. And this is kind of how I learned that video game collecting was like a thing. And they put out this guide. It's the Digital Press Collector's Guide, it's just called. And there's like 2 volumes of it, and this is the first volume. And so it's like all 8-bit systems. And most of these systems are things that people still don't really care about. Although it does include all the Atari home systems, the 2600 through the 7800. And then more importantly, it has the Sega Master System and the NES. And then kind of amusingly, it has the TurboGrafx 16. And the reason I say that's kind of amusing is because the second volume of this, which is called the Advanced Guide, has all the 16-bit and beyond systems. And it also has the TurboGrafx. So they printed it twice. Because the TurboGrafx kind of like straddles the line between 8 and 16-bit. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is what this is sort of, it's a collector's guide, but it's also a price guide. Because until retro gaming like blew up in the last few years, prices were like pretty consistent and they were a lot cheaper. And like I looked up some of the prices in here, like for instance, like the Super Mario games for the NES, like 1, 2, and 3. Are listed in here at $1, $1, and $2 respectively. And then even like expensive games like Magical Chase for the TurboGrafx 16 was $150 was the price in here. And at that time, the idea of paying that much money for a game was like ridiculous. Like I'm not paying $150 for an old video game. Like it's not. Sorry, like Magical Chase isn't that good. And now of course anybody would gladly pay 10 times that for a US copy of Magical Chase. But at the time, most of us weren't thinking of things in those terms. Like video games were not a commodity. They were just something cool to buy and play. But, now like people are a lot more in now to collecting than they were back then. So I really don't buy that many games anymore. So sorry, Simon. I know that's a long answer, but it's just, when you ask something like that and I think about it, and it's like, 99% of my collection I got when it was just other people's garbage and it didn't really have any like value. It had value to me because I thought they were cool and I wanted to play them. And I used to go out to thrift shops or the flea market or garage sales, and I would always come home with stuff because it was just plentiful. And now it's I don't even bother going out anymore because it's just not even worth it. So for this next question, I don't know why I've gotten this question quite a few times. I didn't really think this was going to be a big deal. I put this sign up over my desk that's sort of in the background when I shoot the intros for my videos. And ever since I did, it's like when I first started wearing, you can't see it because it's off camera up there, but I've got my Senna hat that, like Brazilians see that I'm wearing that hat. They're like, oh, you have a Senna hat, and which is cool. So hello to all my Brazilian fans. And then I put up this sign, and so then now I have all these Finnish people leaving me comments and questions. And so I get all these questions like, are you Finnish or whatever? And so the first person to ask this question was a guy named Riverhill here on YouTube, and he just wants to know, what's with the Finnish no loitering sign on your wall? So let's just take a look at it real quick. All right, so here we are in front of the infamous sign. I've never tried actually hand-holding one of these microphones before, so I don't actually know if this is even going to sound good. And I mean, just to knock another question out, people keep asking me what kind of microphone this is, and it is an Audio-Technica AT2020. It's not the USB version. They also make a USB version. This is just a normal XLR version. So anyway, to get back to the sign. So no, I'm not Finnish. I used to work for a company that had like a Finnish division or whatever, and I had to go there for 3 weeks one time and, work in the facility there. And they had this whole area full of shelves with stuff that they weren't using anymore, just for whatever reason. And I saw this sign, and I was like, wow, that's kind of a cool looking sign. Like, that would look cool hanging up at my house, just because you don't see a sign like that around here. So it was, getting about time for me to leave. And so I just asked, I said, hey, that sign's pretty cool. Can I have that sign? And they kind of thought it was weird, but they were like, well, I guess, we're not using it. But do you know what it means? And I said, well, no, And Finnish people, people think they don't have a sense of humor, but they do. And he said it means no high fives, because see, it's the thing with the thing. That is not at all what that means, though. I'm not gonna try to insult any of my Finnish viewers by attempting to pronounce that, but basically what it says is no loitering. I actually typed this. If you type this all into Google Translate, it actually just says no loitering. But if you type the words in individually, it's basically saying like unauthorized waiting around is prohibited or something like that, because Finnish people words are normally very long. But yeah, so it's just a no loitering sign. I like to make the joke. Sometimes the Finnish people will ask on the channel like why I have that sign, and I just tell them, I don't want Finnish people like hanging around in here. And so what better way than to put up a sign in their own language so that they know that it's time for them to, get out. So anyway, that's the story of the sign. All right, so thanks again, Riverhill, for that question. Hopefully that clears that up for all the Finnish people out there. So the next question, what is the trickiest or toughest part of producing your videos? Well, the trickiest part, I would have to say, once I decide that I'm going to make a video about, topic X, then I just start doing research. Like, I have my magazines and I have books, and of course I have the internet, and I start writing the entire script, for all the narration that I do. And I mean, it's not easy, but it's straightforward. You just do all the reading and you figure out what you want to include and you don't want to include, and you write it, and then I go down in my basement and I record it. And the hard part is that once I have that audio file and I bring it I use Final Cut Pro to do editing. Once I bring it in there, I have to find visual material to line up with everything that I said. And sometimes it's not very straightforward. Like I'll say like a couple of sentences where I think like, well, what am I going to put? What are people going to look at, while I'm saying that? Because I can't just put nothing. And I'll spend sometimes 30 to 60 minutes looking for a picture or a short clip that's only going to end up in the final episode for like 5 or 10 seconds or less. And part of it is just that I'm kind of a perfectionist. And anytime, a mistake makes it out onto YouTube, or even sometimes I notice that a cut is not exactly timed perfectly for me. Like I'm talking, between two sentences, it cuts from like one image to another, and it's the cut ended up not exactly where I think it should have been, but I just didn't notice it or whatever. It just kills me. And when I make mistakes in the videos, like I say the wrong thing, like I get so many comments about, like I think my only second or third ever video that I did was reviewing Doom for the PlayStation. And I said that Doom was actually a 3D game while Wolfenstein was 2D, and that's wrong. And I still get tons of comments. In fact, I got called a retard this week. And you just have to learn to grow a thick skin, and I don't know who you are and what your deal is, but you're not making YouTube videos. I know that. And so if people want to stop by and hurl personal insults at me, I really just don't care anymore. But it took me a long time to get that way. It's not about getting positive comments or negative comments. It's just about enjoying making videos. and part of that is kind of learning how to filter out a lot of the negativity that's out there on social media, because there's quite a bit of it. So that's question number 4. So I'm really trying to hit the camera with these, and they're all just going like that. So this last question, this was my favorite question. I actually put out something on Twitter quite some time ago saying that I was doing this Q&A video, and it just took me a long time to get to it. But this was by far, I think, the best question that I got. And in fact, I liked it so much that I enlisted a bunch of my friends to help me answer it. And the question comes from my friend Peter Scarrett, who's a longtime supporter of the show. And Peter asks, if you could be a part of any console launch in history again, which would it be, why, and which games would you get? Well, Peter, you asked the question, so why don't you answer it first?
If you could go back in time and re-experience any console launch, which one would it be, and why? My answer to that question would be the launch of the Sega Dreamcast console back on September 9th of 1999. The launch lineup of software for the Dreamcast is the best that I have ever seen. NFL Blitz 2000 and Hydro Thunder brought the arcade home in a way that I had never seen before. Ready to Rumble Boxing was a brand new boxing IP, and more fun with a boxing game than I had ever played since Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, I guess. Sonic Adventure brought Sonic into 3D for the first time legitimately, and I had a blast with it. And most importantly, NFL 2K launched the 2K lineup of sports games. A lineup of sports games that held EA to the fire and competed with them pretty well for a few years, and represented some of my favorite sports games from Generation 6.
The N64 launch represented a huge change for me in how I looked at video games. I was 13 years old when it launched, which I feel is a great age for really enjoying whatever the current consoles are. But for a long time, my only home console was the NES, and I was really grumpy about all other consoles because I saw them as replacing what I had. I didn't even get a Super Nintendo until '94, so when I soon learned that it would be replaced in a fairly short time by the N64, I wasn't too happy about the idea of yet another system. But nothing could have prepared me for my unexpected experience playing an N64 in Toys R Us just before launch. Super Mario 64 gave me a 3D space to play in that went beyond anything I had ever imagined, and that initial sense of awe is one of my fondest gaming memories. If only I'd known sooner, I could have joined in on the pre-release excitement and actually been ready to get an N64 on launch day. So that marked the point where I actually started following games and looking forward to the future, not being skeptical about it. And the N64 was the last time I missed a Nintendo console launch.
I would say for me personally, if I was to go back and relive the console launch, I would say for me personally, the one I'd want to go back through again would be the original 8-bit Nintendo. Even though technically it launched in late 85, I got mine for Christmas 86 because that's when, for the most part, as far as once they were out the testing market, they didn't really spread them out until in 86, mid 86 or so. I got the original set, which was the two controllers, the system Rob the Robot, Gyromite, and Duck Hunt. My brother and I, we played the absolute hell out of Gyromite and Duck Hunt. The first game I got, third-party game I got for the console was a couple weeks after Christmas. I had some Christmas money left over, and we went up, and I think it was Source Merchandise I bought it from. I got Kung Fu, which the Nintendo version of Kung Fu is not super accurate compared to the arcade version in terms of the way it looks, but it's really fun. And that's the one I grew up on, was playing the 8-bit NES Kung Fu. But yeah, when the 16-bit revolution kind of started, the Genesis rolled out in the TurboGrafx, I pretty much totally ignored those. I was Nintendo 8-bit fanboy, and I was holding off for the Super Nintendo. So for me, for 5 years, from Christmas of 86 till Christmas of 91, I was just completely engulfed in 8-bit Nintendo.
If we could be a part of any console launch in history again, which one would it be? Jeff?
Well, the Xbox 360 always piqued my interest. Bill Gates and the guys down at New York and Times Square made it look like a lot of fun. And it had some fun games, and it was a pretty good system as well, which was nice. Yet, to me, the game lineup was just amazing. I just remember it blowing me away visually, and I still, to this day, think that for that time, it was a very nice assortment of games. You had Project Gotham Racing 3, Fight Night Round 3, Perfect Dark Zero, which, while many didn't like, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fine launch title.
Jeff likes shiny things.
I do. You also had a really cool infrastructure for the system. I mean, you had networking built into it. You had the ability to connect to your computer or home network to listen to music, to watch movies. You had a DVD player right out of the box.
It also ushered in a whole new era of 12-year-olds screaming obscenities over the internet.
Yeah, it was.
What about you, John?
I'd have to say my console launch would be the Nintendo Wii. It was an innovative console at the time. They were introducing the Wiimote, which was this brand new, innovative thing, and all of the games that came along with it that utilized this Wiimote in all sorts of ways couldn't even imagine. My personal favorite was the pack-in, the Wii Sports games. I was always a huge fan of Wii Bowling.
Tennis?
No way. No, baseball all the way. Babe Ruth, right here.
For me, having lived through just about every console launch out there, the one I really want to revisit the most is, of course, the most botched one in history, being the Sega Saturn launch. Of course, when it launched, nobody knew it was launching, and so I didn't have the money to get it right away. It took me a few weeks to scrounge up half the money and then borrow the other half from a friend. It would be great to be able to go back and be ready for that launch, because the Sega Saturn really did usher in a new era of arcade experiences in the home. Of course, you had Daytona USA, and while it wasn't perfect, it did bring that arcade experience home. So did Virtua Fighter. And of course, we had whole new experiences, such as Panzer Dragoon, with its incredible orchestral soundtrack, dynamic sweeping camera angles, and of course its CG cutscenes, which were pretty novel at the time. It really was an exciting time to be getting into the 32-bit era. And the Sega Saturn really left a lasting impression on me. And to be able to go and revisit that launch would be really exciting to do all over again. As bad as it was, I would definitely do it again. So there you have it. Those are our picks.
All right, now for me, I thought a long time about this question because it's hard to come up with just one. And so the thing for me is, like, it would be really easy for me to say that I want to go back and relive like the NES launch or the Genesis or the Super Nintendo, since sort of that era of gaming is my favorite. But I feel like that's unrealistic, and because I was 8 years old when the NES was launched, and I was like 12 and 14 respectively when the Genesis and the Super Nintendo were launched. So that was never like gonna happen. Like, it's not like I could have gotten those, but I spent my money on, like, G.I. Joes and gummy worms instead. Like, I was never gonna get those consoles at launch. And so unless I can go back to 1989, being a 39-year-old, there's no point in saying, oh yeah, I wish I could do the Genesis again. But the thing is, when the Sony PlayStation launched, I was 18 and I had a job. I had a full-time job. And a guy I worked with and all of his friends were getting a PlayStation. They had actually pre-ordered it, which was like kind of a new thing, at least to me back then. And you could actually pre-order 16-bit systems, but like this was the first time I'd ever heard about the concept of pre-ordering something. And so I remember that day where they all, like, he got off work and his friends came and met up with him, and they all went off and got their PlayStations, and Battle Arena Toshinden was the game that they all wanted. And I just remember him telling me that the game, or that the system, was $300. And you have to remember that in 1995, minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. So, working a 40-hour week, I was making like $180 before tax. So, $300 plus a game, that's another $50, plus a memory card, that's another $20. So that's what? It's $370. Plus, I would have personally had to buy an RF adapter. So let's just say it's $380 plus tax. You're over like $400. So you're talking about like 3 weeks or something of my pay going to nothing but a video game system. But the thing is, like, I lived at home still. And like I wasn't really paying rent, and I was spending all my money on just stupid stuff. So it's not like I couldn't have saved up, and that's what I should have done. If I had just, all summer or something, taken a little bit of money from each paycheck and set it aside, I could have gotten a PlayStation at launch. So if I could go back in time, I wish I had just saved up some money for the summer and gotten a Sony PlayStation. And to the second part of your question, which games would you have gotten? I can tell you matter-of-factly that I would have gotten Ridge Racer. I know myself enough, even, I know the 18-year-old version of myself, that I absolutely would have gone to the store and bought a PlayStation and Ridge Racer and the needed accessories, and I would have come home with that. So thank you, Peter. That was a really good question. Very apropos for my channel. That's going to do it for this inaugural episode of CGQ&A. Please let me know what you think. Do you like this kind of stuff? I know that it's not a launch episode, and I promise I'm not going to flood the channel with this. And trust me when I say that it's still my priority to make like the launch episodes and whatnot. But I just want to do something a little bit fun and sort of laid back, and I think that's what this can be. And so I'm kind of excited about the possibilities sort of for this format going forward in the future. If you want to submit a question, you can, as I said, you can hit me up on Twitter. It's at CGQuarterly, or you can send us an email, cgquarterly@gmail.com, or you can just leave a comment below. Would be fine too. So I look forward to reading your feedback, and we'll see you next time.